What seems to be the case is that the vast majority of major news, so that's the kind of things that you might want to read about on, say, a newspaper or something like this, right, is covered in all media, traditional newswire, also social media and the like. That there are sort of classes of stories that are not covered in both, right? So, for example, for social media, you tend to get things like so-called hyperlocal events, and then there are things like kind of events where people are actually on the spot. So these usually are things like sports events. So you know the World Cup's happening now, right? But that's also a bad example because that's fully televised. But for some things, you know, where they're not televised, say, because of sort of copyright and stuff like this, or they're broadcast with a delay. People can tweet about things before they actually get out. Right? So under those circumstances, social media would win. And then there are and the other sort of class of events are things like disasters as well. So typically these things are earthquakes and fires and so on and so forth. Now, you get stuff in mainstream news which is not reported in Twitter because they have different biases, right? And vice versa as well. Okay, so the evidence is that on average, traditional media beats social media, or they're equal, right? Because typically what happens nowadays is that all of the major outlets simultaneously report stuff on, say, Twitter and Newswire, right? Or they report it first on Newswire and later do a follow-up post on Twitter. So we did some work a while back on trying to predict when things will be propagated. So this is retweeted on Twitter, right? So let's say you have some post of importance. One way to measure the value of it is how often it's, do people bother retweeting the thing, right? And you can look at the time of day and the chance for something being retweeted, and also the day of the week as well. So it turns out, for instance, that the best time to post something would be about 11 in the morning. The worst time would be like, say, 3 a.m. Okay, so it turns out it's actually more important who you are than what you write. So if I'm some celebrity, right, anything I write will get, almost anything I write will get reposted. If I'm some nobody, then I have to work harder. Now, if I'm some nobody, then it is possible to work out which words are more likely to be to cause someone to repost. I mean, this is basically what spammers try to do. You think about it, right? But they're not clever enough to do this properly. Yes. I mean, it's all the obvious things you can think of, right? So we also looked at the length of the tweet. So I mean, it turns out that, as you might guess, the more content a tweet has, the more likely it will be retweeted. I don't think that people's posting behavior is strongly sort of modified by use of hashtags and so on. As I said, I think that although there is information content in hashtags, I think it's overblown. I don't think it's true to say that these things are dead, because they do have a role to play, just so it's not as great as people might think. So Google Plus is basically a desert. Currently, no, I don't think so. But it's hard to tell what's going to happen in the future. I mean, so one of the differences is that you don't really associate Google Plus or Facebook as a place to get news, right? But more people visit these things than Twitter. So in the long run, if people's perception about where to get news changes, then you're better off investing in Facebook than Twitter. Also, the medium is different as well. So people use Facebook and Google Plus as much more like a standard blog site, because you get like a much longer post. You have images, and you get the threaded conversation below it as well. and you don't really get that kind of thing on Twitter, right? So it's a lot harder to put out some kind of like interesting post on Twitter, and also to sort of have a like really focused discussion on it as well.